Advocacy Coalition briefing. Thank you for joining us. It's nice to see some familiar faces and names here. I'm Diana Falzone, an EndoFound ambassador, executive producer, and host of Endo TV, and more importantly, a woman with endometriosis. As many of you know, the Endometriosis Foundation of America, also referred to as EndoFound, was co-founded by Dr. Tamar Sechkin and Padma Lakshmi over a decade ago with the hopes to raise awareness about this little-known debilitating disease and make strides for positive change. That is why today is so important, because you can be a part of that positive change for those with endometriosis. We'll be having a virtual Hill Day on May 17th. This Hill Day will contain a briefing with co-founders Padma Lakshmi, Dr. Sechkin, and EndoFound ambassadors like Corinne Fox and myself. Additionally, we will be having individual meetings with lawmakers about why endo should be a priority for them. Former Congresswoman Abby Finkenauer, who is currently an EndoFound ambassador and a current candidate for U.S. Senate in Iowa, joins us today to break down exactly what a Hill Day entails and how you can help. Welcome, Abby.
Well, hello there, Diana, and thanks so much for everybody being here. So excited to start.
It's awesome. And you obviously know the inner workings firsthand because you created history. And I would like to say thank you for all that you have done for those with the 1 in 10, because without you, we wouldn't be here. You created the Endometriosis Congressional Caucus. Why did you do that?
Yeah, so this actually came from me trying to fly home one weekend. I went home nearly every single weekend while I was in Congress, and I was sitting there looking at flight delays because I was trying to get back to Iowa, and seeing that I might have to be stuck in the Charlotte airport for about 8 hours. And at the same time, I was doubled over in my bed in pain because I was having a flare-up. And I was so frustrated and just so annoyed that this is still happening. And I was just trying to figure out, oh my goodness, what do I do? How do I make this stop? And I just started Googling endometriosis and hysterectomies because all I could think of was just, how do I take everything out and make everything go away, because I was just so frustrated. And that's actually when I found the website for Endometriosis Foundation of America. And when I clicked on it, I realized, oh my gosh, I'm realizing there are many better different alternatives than getting a hysterectomy, for one. So I saw that, right? But then I also started seeing the stats on the side of the page talking about how 1 in 10 women have this. And I was sitting there in Congress as somebody who had it, who had been a state rep before that, had no idea, no clue that so many other folks in this country had it, or across the globe, obviously. And then I saw another stat, and it said that endometriosis research was actually at basically the bottom of the National Institute of Health when it comes to funding. And I thought to myself, somebody had better change that. That seems really terrible. And then I was going, oh, well, you know what? I'm in Congress. I suppose I could change that. And I called my chief of staff, who's on this call, and it's been just phenomenal to get to work with on a number of things. And I called him and I said, hey, Tyler, I want to join the Endometriosis Caucus. And he goes, there isn't one. And I said, what do you mean there isn't an endometriosis caucus? I mean, there's a caucus for big cats, right? Like, there's gotta be an endometriosis caucus. And he said, no, there isn't one. I said, well, we're gonna start one. And it was important for me that we actually made it bipartisan, because this is not something that just affects Democratic folks or Republican folks, right? Like, we have to be able to bring people together. And so went off, started to do that, and made it my mission in that, it was actually, we started the caucus right before COVID really hit, but I made it my mission in the middle of that to actually double the funding, and we did. So
yeah, and now, even though you're no longer in Congress, Representative Nikema Williams has decided to relaunch that. So we've been a part of that at EndoFound, and that is still going on, which is really, really exciting. Can you explain our Hill goals, how people who might not feel like they necessarily have a voice publicly, such as yourself, how can the citizen get involved? How can we help?
Yeah, so this is why I was really excited about the UpEndo coalitions, but very specifically the citizen advocacy piece of this, which is where you all come in. As somebody who has, been in public service, right, and has been a lawmaker before, one of the things that I know matters most.
Representative Akima Williams has decided to relaunch that. So,
I think there's some feedback. There we go. Okay, that's better now. But one of the things that is most important always has been to me, actually making sure that personal stories are being heard. I saw that really early on. I remember being in the State House and somebody coming up, just with a flyer of all of the data, right? And all of, graphs, everything like that, pie charts on it. And that's great. But then when they actually had somebody telling their story, that's where I went, oh boy, we got to change this. And I can't remember what the specific issue is, right? But it was something where it really does make an impact on you when you hear the personal stories. And so again, it's why it's so incredibly important that we have the folks on this call willing to uplift their stories as well. And I'll be frank, I even did that kind of advocacy of telling my own personal story, talking to my former colleagues, right? And so one of the things I did, as I started this caucus, I wanted people to join it. And I just started walking around and telling people about what I'd gone through and what endometriosis was and what was so impactful. And again, why your stories are so important to reach out to your lawmakers and tell them is so many people had a connection to it. I remember it was Representative Colin Allred from Texas, who's a good friend of mine. He goes, oh my gosh, my best friend has endometriosis. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes, of course I'll join your caucus. There was another lawmaker from Illinois, and he goes, yeah, my wife has it. And of course I'll join your caucus. There was a lawmaker, a good friend of mine, Susie Lee from Nevada, and she goes, my sister has this. And of course I'll join. And it just kept going, right? I even found there were other members who had it and hadn't ever shared their stories before. And so that is, again, why your stories are so important, because it makes people, again, feel more connected to it and willing and able to do something. These lawmakers are getting a lot of stuff thrown at them during the day from many different people, but when they make a connection or they hear a story about how it's impacting people that they're supposed to be representing, right? If they're good lawmakers, they should want to do something about it, right? And so that's why the advocacy piece is so important, and sharing your story is so important.
Yeah, and it's very empowering when more people collectively come together and feel as though it isn't just it's so many other people who are going through it. And like you said, it pulls out at the heartstrings, it resonates for them to want to be impassioned to make a change. What are some advocacy best practices for those who want to make a difference? Like you said, sharing your personal stories. What else could someone do to help?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things is, again, being, as you just said, Diana, doing it in full force, right? And bringing a coalition with you, which is why, again, the UpEndo Citizen Advocacy Coalition is so important here. And so one of the things I really want to make sure you know, we are gonna, I imagine, throw these in the chat. We'll be sending them out afterwards too. But there are there's email language that you can send where we're asking very specifically for different things, and hearing it from multiple people also helps. But there's an area there too where it's like you can actually insert your personal story here as well. The other piece is you can talk about it on social media. You can at your favorite lawmaker, right? And use the hashtag UpEndo to make sure that, again, we are being heard in a collective voice here. And it's just so important that that is done in that way, to be able to, again, really make an impact. And I just have to say, it's the work with the Endometriosis Foundation of America has allowed us to be able to do that, right? Like, this is a space where there has been, advocacy work done and so many groups, and so grateful. But I will say, taking it this level of making very specific asks when it comes to legislation, that type of stuff, and really bringing people in to tell their stories. This is the type of work that really has needed to be done for a really long time when it comes to endometriosis. And it's how change really does happen. And so please, please, please stay involved. The next time you're on this Zoom, bring more friends, right? It doesn't have to be your friends, right, who have endo, but they're advocates for you because they've seen it, right? They also have a story to tell. My husband has a story to tell about this, right? Of watching me, getting through the day, that type of thing. And, again, bring in allies here, because the louder the voices, the more voices, again, the more things can actually get done.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen in the past with EndoFound how, because of the collective group of voices, how we've been able to make change, even down to the state level, having the menstrual disorder health bill that was passed into law in New York in 2018, so that menstrual education can be offered to schools that want it, so there can be signs and symptoms of endometriosis. So I think it's really important for people to know that sometimes we minimize that we're just one voice, but when we all come together, there's so much power in numbers, and we are taking it at the grassroots level by doing this kind of citizen coalition. Because, like you said, writing a letter, sharing it on social, it amplifies the overall message, which is we demand to be heard. We no longer want to be silenced. It isn't just one of us in 10, it's an estimated 200 million globally. And this shouldn't be something that's ignored, that diabetes and endo, like, their funding should be the same. And we can't lose sight of just how serious of an illness it is, and how it does impact someone's mental health, their work, their schooling. I mean, it is insidious. And the time for change is now. I want to open up the floor, because I realize that when we talk about anything that has to do with Congress, caucuses, bills, coalitions, it's not our mainstream jargon here. So if there are any questions for Abby that you would like to have addressed here, please raise your hand. Those fun little emojis, if you have anything you'd like to ask, and we'll be happy to address them. And also, for those of you who are looking for more information, I believe that the link is up, and the landing page is endofound.org/advocacy. That's where you'll find the templates for the letter and for the social media language, if you would like to do that as well. Abby, you might have to help me, because I am trying to see if there's any hands being raised at this time. And sometimes Zoom is not my best friend.
I am not seeing any. However, if there are any questions that come up afterwards, feel free, or even during this, to type them in the chat, that type of thing. And even if we don't get to them during this Zoom, we can follow up afterwards as well.
Jean, who is part of EndoFound, has a hand raised. Jean, the floor is yours.
I was hoping that maybe we could go over just a little bit. There's always sometimes a feeling that when you write a letter to your local senator or whatnot, that it kind of feels like it goes into this black hole. So I was wondering, Abby, if you could just talk a little bit about how you, spending your time in Congress, how important it was that individuals like all of us make a change by sending a letter or writing an email or making a phone call.
Yeah, the biggest thing on that is it shouldn't just be a form letter, right? I mean, that's fine. You can just send what we've, suggested, or all of that, and that's fine. But truthfully, the biggest thing here is if you are able to tell your story or what you're comfortable with, and make it really personal, because that's the stuff that, again, the lawmakers will see. And it's not just something that's being logged, that somebody has sent, a form letter where they've gotten like 500 of the same form letters, right? You're not going to have a lawmaker sitting there reading 500 exact same form letters. Like, that's just not how it works. But when it comes to your personal story, and it is something, again, that is impacting their constituents, they should read it. They should look at it. They should, again, have an impact and be willing to do something. The other thing is, too, I mean, especially when it comes to your members of Congress, you can request meetings with them. And it is their job to take them, right? So
I never knew that you could actually do that as just like a private citizen. You can request. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that. And I mean, that's great too, of being able to tell your story and why this matters. And also, again, be able to say, here are, the priorities that, the UpEndo the Advocacy Coalition is fighting for. And that's actually, so it's basically what the Endometriosis Foundation of America is kind of doing on behalf of many folks across the country in the next couple of weeks, and, meeting with the heads of appropriation, that type of stuff. That's going to be the goal here. And that's what, the group is doing. But there's also always stuff that you can do too, as a citizen who just wants to tell their story. And so that is sending the letters, it's sending the emails, it's all of that. But also don't be afraid to go to they should be doing town halls, right? Like they should be out there doing town halls. Go to a town hall, ask a question about, will they prioritize funding for endometriosis, right? Like these are things you can do. And you shouldn't be afraid to do them, because lawmakers shouldn't be scary. I'm a very normal person here. And just, when I was in office, just trying to do my job and do it right and listen to my constituents. There's a lot of folks I don't agree with on a number of issues, but I hope that is their their goal as well. And it is, quite frankly, their job, right? Whether it's their goal or not, it is their job to listen to you. And so you can make them.
And can you call? You can call the office and you can request to be heard and say, this is an important issue. I think that XYZ congressperson should be looking into this and, allocate funding or things along those lines.
Yes, absolutely. I think, you can, with working with the UpEndo Advocacy Coalition, you're going to be able to have all of this kind of at your disposal of saying, okay, this is what is needed. This is why this is important. I just saw there's a question, the thing, how do you know who to contact in your state? Is it usually a state representative that you contact? So you can contact your state representative. Yes. And you can literally go to your Secretary of State's website. I imagine most states have a Secretary of State's website where you can type in your address and it'll tell you your state representative. But so I know every state's a little bit different of how you find that. But yes, you can contact your state representative to let them know that this is something that they should prioritize. But when it comes to your congressional representative, I believe on the endometriosis website, there was a whole section, and we can make sure that that is still there or gets re-upped, where you can literally look up, given your address, who your congressperson is and request that they join the endometriosis caucus. And so that's something that can be done as well. And you can find who your elected representative is. And then also you'd be able to find, just honestly, Google will tell you all of their contact information, usually, where their offices are, right? Drop into the office in district, right? Like you can do these types of things, and you should. And it's always really exciting when, again, it's real people doing it, not just, lobbyists in DC or something like that, but real people.
Right. And I do, going back to your earlier point about when you told your story and seeing how there was this trickle effect of learning so many people were hit home, if not themselves, then someone they cared about with endometriosis. When I had the honor of going in 2018 with EndoFound, and I testified on Capitol Hill about the importance of research and awareness, I was shocked afterwards because I saw staffers visibly shook up. And a couple of them came up to me, tears in their eyes, and they said, I believe I have this. I believe that I didn't even realize what the signs and symptoms were. So it's almost like, as much as we are asking of the lawmakers, it's also an educational time too, for the patient advocates to be saying, like, this is a disease that affects so many that maybe you don't even know about. Maybe this isn't even on your radar. Like, you had to create the caucus, yet big cats had one. What does that say? Yeah. Not that big cats aren't important, but there's a lot to be said about, as we keep saying, uplifting our voices using the UpEndo Citizen Advocacy Coalition. I'm going to see if we have any more questions going on here. And also Tyler, he will be able to, if he's willing to jump on, give us an update on the status of appropriations. Tyler, would you mind explaining that?
Sure, yeah, happy to jump in quickly here. So I think some folks may have seen some communication from the Endometriosis Foundation talking about the additional funding that was secured through the appropriations process last fiscal year. And just for context, each year, Congress goes through what we call the appropriations process. And that's kind of broken out by fiscal year. So let me adjust my video here. Hello, everybody. So yeah, every year, Congress goes through the appropriations process. And so the FY22 process just wrapped up a couple of months ago. And in that, by working with the Endometriosis Caucus, we were able to secure an increase in funding for the National Institutes of Health overall. And why that's important is, so much research and awareness funding goes through different federal agencies, and in particular, the research funding and research grant funding. And so you have a couple federal agencies that, really receive a significant amount of research funding. And that includes the National Institutes of Health, the Department of Defense, and even the Veterans Affairs Administration, for example. And, those are kind of odd agencies to think about, but when you think about the number of military and armed services personnel and veterans in the country, there are a lot. And so, they have pretty significant research budgets. So what we've been focused on with, in partnership with the caucus is identifying those federal agencies that have the biggest footprint in providing grants to doctors, to hospitals, to medical researchers, to, even, medical students who are, getting into the field, and working with them to make sure that endometriosis is at the top of the list for research grants and is a priority for awarding those grants. For, a lot of, for these federal agencies in particular, you have to have a certain disease listed in the appropriations bills for them to even consider accepting research applications for those diseases. So that's why it's so important that we work with, our members of Congress, members of the Endometriosis Caucus in Congress, to let them know that it is a priority, that endometriosis continues to be included as a priority for the National Institutes of Health, again, for the Department of Defense. And this year, we're trying to go for the Veterans Affairs, Administration as well. So, again, those emails, phone calls, social media is all really, really helpful because members of Congress want to hear what their constituents' priorities are. Those personal stories are really important to, relay the importance of focusing on this issue. And, again, hearing from people is just so important so that the members of Congress know that this is a priority and know that we're keeping track of this and we're trying to stay on top of it.
Thank you, Tyler. And that was very helpful. And I will leave this open to you and to Abby, but we have a question coming in through Facebook for people who are not United States citizens but want to get involved. How can global citizens come together on this issue? If you have any suggestions.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, even if you're not, in the US, social media is probably the easiest way to help out there. And, tagging lawmakers and just letting them know this is a priority. I know the Endometriosis Foundation and our UpEndo Coalition will also have some additional action items like sign-on letters and things like that going on throughout the year that you can take part in as well.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't know where you're at globally, but it's pretty interesting what some other countries are doing to actually drive awareness to endometriosis and put additional funding behind it. I believe it's France who began basically it looks like an entire new almost department itself to study endometriosis, and there is some really interesting things being done globally, because again, this doesn't just affect folks in America but also across the globe, and there are countries stepping up doing more. So I would be very curious, depending on where you're at, look at what your country is doing, and if you can advocate if they're not doing enough for them to do more, right? Because it's what the research, that gets done in the United States of America can also benefit people globally as well, and vice versa. Yeah. So that's really important.
That makes sense. We have a raised hand. Sanjay?
Yes, thank you. I'll put my hand down now. So I am from Canada, but also we have work going on in the Netherlands, France, also the UK with endometriosis and the diagnostic and therapy area. So Congresswoman, first of all, kudos to you and for bringing this up and championing this within the U.S. political system. I think what would be helpful, and I think what was successful in France, is for people who advocate to understand the context or the lens from which the politicians make decisions. So as when Dana was talking about the funding for diabetes, for example, doesn't even come close, right, or is far exceeding what is done in endo. And there's an opportunity cost that from an economic principles that kind of applied in decision making. So it'd be really good if you could touch on how decisions are made of how to allocate those dollars, so that the information that the advocacy is doing can be, let's say, specifically targeted and put into a framework and a context that is easily for them to digest and make those decisions. Because you have a limited resources and constraints, and people are, fiddling out with the zero-sum game. So if they take it away from something, they go to another. We come from the West parliamentary system in Britain and in Canada, where we have Pareto optimality as one of the things, which basically means if you benefit one group, you can't do it at the expense of somebody else. So if you could touch on, the decision-making side of how decisions are made and how research dollars are allocated, it may help to frame those conversations. Thank you.
Yeah, so I believe historically, one of the issues when it comes to endometriosis is it is a condition that has affected women. And the fact is, this country has not done enough when it comes to women's health and placing a priority on that. And part of that is actually changing how lawmakers view women's health. Obviously, there's a lot going on in that space right now that needs to be addressed. And it also means electing people who want to actually care about it and who are going to actually uplift these issues and place more priorities on them. It is interesting when, again, you look at the history of what is funded and what is not. And it's just making sure that we are bringing more people together here, where we are even just making them aware, right? I think that was when you don't even have a caucus for something, the awareness level is obviously incredibly low then on the Hill, versus if you actually have, a whole group that is focused on this issue and raising it. And that was one of the reasons we decided to actually start the Endo Caucus, was because it just kind of, it elevates it to a level, making sure that people are paying attention to it. But yes, there's plenty more work to do, but I truly believe one of the biggest reasons is because this is a condition that affects people with uteruses.
Well, thank you for that, Abby. We're getting a question via Facebook as well. And I know we touched upon this before, but maybe to reiterate, where can we find these links and addresses to send letters to our lawmakers? That's just individually going on your state's homepages and lawmakers' homepages and trying to reach out that way?
I can jump in on that. So to start there, as Congresswoman mentioned before, you can find information about contacting your federal lawmakers often on the Secretary of State's website. I would also say an easy place to look also is just house.gov and then also senate.gov. So you have your House member that represents your U.S. House member that represents your area, and then you have the 2 senators that represent your state. And there's usually links to their contact me page and their phone number and their office locations on those sites as well. I will say though that we do have a day of action guide that we have put together for May 17th. Contained in that guide, we have links to those. How do you find your House member? How do you find your Senate member? And also those email templates are included there as well. Those are going to be on the Endometriosis Foundation of America website. So if you just go to endofound.org, you'll be able to find them there.
Great, thank you. And I just want to open up the floor again for one final time for any questions. We're happy to answer to our best abilities. Again, we are having our virtual Hill Day on May 17th. Your voice matters. Please visit endofound.org/advocacy. I also want to go back to Abby and just get an elementary kind of explanation of what the Endometriosis Caucus does and how it works, because I know some people have heard the term and the phrase a lot, but don't necessarily know what it does.
Yeah, the whole point of the caucus is to actually work with like-minded lawmakers. Again, this caucus in particular was formed very purposefully to be bipartisan, right? So this isn't an ideological caucus, which usually means kind of like which level of the spectrum politically do you fall in. It is a issues caucus, which that means there are lawmakers that have joined it from, Democratic and Republican Party who care about the issue of endometriosis, right? And so what that does then is create this space where when it comes to whether it's advocacy, whatever it is, right, for higher funding, for more awareness, for even tackling issues that need to be addressed when it even comes to how things are billed in regards to endometriosis, right? There are many complicated issues that have to do with, folks actually being treated with this, that this caucus can then look at and focus on and collectively come together and do something about it, right? And it gives a space then for, again, you've got the Endometriosis Foundation of America, who is obviously doing a lot in this space. There are other organizations doing work in this space as well, a place for them to go and say, okay, here is the chairperson of this caucus and somebody that we should talk to about it, or maybe they want to come speak in front of the caucus, right? It's a way to organize around an issue and get lawmakers excited about it and it collectively do something.
We have a question from EndoFound's Jean. Hello, Jean.
Hello. Hey, Abby, one other thing that we wanted to mention, and it's something that we've been promoting through our UpEndo coalition that we formed late last year. But one of the things Abby has been telling us is also to advocate for your congressman to join the House Endometriosis Caucus. So that's a separate sort of ask from what we're gonna, we'll be doing. So there's multiple asks there, and we will have that on the website, but Abby can explain that as well.
Yes. So within the Endometriosis Foundation of America's website, you should be able to find the space. Again, I'm hoping we can just send over the links to folks who are on this call so that they can easily find them and just click on them. But if you type in, again, your address, you'll be able to find your congressperson and click on them and send them a request to join the caucus for endometriosis, which is great. I mean, I think there's right now 30 some members, maybe more, maybe less. There should be more though, and it's not a hard ask, right? These folks join many different caucuses. They need to be asked. They need to know why it's important to their constituents, and it's not. So please don't feel like you are asking them to, like, you know, move the moon or something like that. It's not that. It is something where they should be joining and should be open to hearing more when it comes to updates on the issue of things that are needing to be done, of requests for funding, that type of stuff. They should want to be a part of that. This is not, again, a partisan issue in any sense of the word. It is something that affects so many people here in this country. And if it's impacting you as their constituent, they should care and they should want to be part of it.
Absolutely. And to just remind everyone, that link is endofound.org/advocacy. And there's also a guide as well. If you have questions, you can email Jean at endofound.org. You can also email me, diana.falzone@endofound.org as well. Jean, do we have another question?
No, I just wanted to give a second. I see that Representative Jillian Gilchrist is on the call, and that she's been doing the working group out of the state of Connecticut. So again, you know, it's both on your state and federal level, but if Representative Gilchrist wanted to say a little something about the work in Connecticut, we have a quick moment.
Thank you so much. So helpful to get this information. It's so nice to see you again, Diana and Abby. In Connecticut, we formed an endometriosis working group. I echo what has been said about folks sharing stories. So we give space at the beginning of each meeting to hear from those directly impacted. It's really allowed, I think, others to come forward. So again, to echo what Abby was sharing, it's so many colleagues have come up to me that it's, you know, their sister or their wife or themselves, and that they didn't even realize what they were experiencing. I also have heard from women in their 60s who, for them, it's something you just never talked about. And so they have this sense of feeling heard and being able to share. And so good news in Connecticut, we just passed legislation. So we're going to be having required training for physicians and a partnership between UConn Health and Jackson Laboratory to start a biorepository. But this is just the beginning for us, and we're planning to continue pushing for many changes here in the state and partnering with you all so that we in our state can push on our federal delegation to make changes at the federal level. So thanks so much for having me.
No, and thank you for all that you've done, because it really does. When we talked about like how many voices in a team, it's all of us. It's every single voice counts. And if every single person just did one letter, one social media post, it would just have such an impact. And it's really wonderful to see. I mean, when I was first diagnosed in 2016 to now, see the growth that's happened even in just those few short years has been really incredible because of the work of people like you and Abby and so many of the doctors that are joining too as well. So thank you all so much for your time today, for your investment into changing this disease so there's more awareness and positive change forward education and research funding, because we need it. We need a cure. I speak selfishly. I want one, and I know you do too. Thank you again for joining us. Be sure to go to endofound.org/advocacy, and we hope that you'll all be part of our virtual Hill Day on May 17th in some way. Thank you all.